Before you scroll away, let me ask you something. What if one day you realized that the world you trust, the one you walk through every day, has places and moments that don't just scare you, but quietly rewrite what reality means? What if fear didn't come from a monster jumping out of the dark, but from something slow, something subtle, something that stays with you long after it's over? The stories you're about to hear are real, or at least as real as the people who lived through them. And by the end of this video, you might find yourself looking at ordinary places in a very different way. The first story begins in a small town in rural Texas, the kind of place where nothing ever seems to happen. Long, empty roads, wide fields, and long nights where the loudest sound is usually insects in the trees. In 2019, a 28-year-old electrician named Jason worked late shifts and often drove home after midnight. His route took him through a stretch of road locals called Hollow Creek Road. People in town joked about it, said it was creepy, said animals avoided it, said their cars sometimes stalled there for no reason. Jason didn't take any of that seriously. To him, it was just another dark road. One night, as he was driving home, something ran across the road in front of his car. He hit the brakes so hard his tires screeched. His heart was pounding, but when he looked, there was nothing there. No animal, no person, nothing. He laughed it off and kept driving. That's when he noticed the fog. It wasn't normal fog. It was thick and low, and it seemed to roll in all at once, swallowing the road ahead of him. The air felt colder, heavier, and then his radio cut out. The dashboard lights flickered, and finally the engine died. Jason pulled over, annoyed more than scared. He tried to start the car again. Nothing, no sound, no lights, just silence and fog. He grabbed his phone. No signal. That's when he heard it. At first, it sounded like the wind moving through the trees, but the more he listened, the more it sounded like whispering. Not clear words, just soft, low murmurs coming from the woods. He opened the door and stepped out, planning to check the hood. His headlights were still on, cutting 2 weak tunnels of light through the fog. And in that light, he saw a shape near the trees. It was tall and thin, and it didn't move like a person. Its posture was wrong. Its arms hung at strange angles. Jason froze. He told himself it was just his eyes playing tricks on him. Fog can do that. Darkness can do that. Then the shape moved. It didn't walk toward him, but somehow it was closer the next time he looked. Jason felt his chest tighten. He took a step back. The ground felt strange under his feet, like his legs were heavier than they should be. The whispering got louder. Still not words, just a sound that made his skin crawl. He turned and ran back to his car, jumped inside, and tried the key again. This time the engine started. He didn't question it. He slammed the gas and drove, not looking in the mirrors until he was far away. When he finally did, the road behind him was empty. No fog, no shape, nothing. The next day, he told a few people what happened. They didn't laugh. Some of them got quiet. One older man told him that Hollow Creek Road had a history of people seeing things, hearing things, and sometimes not coming back at all. Jason tried to forget about it, but he couldn't. He started sleeping with the lights on. He said sometimes, late at night, he could still hear faint whispering even in his own apartment. A few weeks later, Jason went back during the day, trying to prove to himself that nothing was wrong with that road. He parked, walked a little way into the trees, and found nothing. No fog, no shapes, just silence. But on the asphalt, near where his car had stalled, there were strange marks. Long, thin scratches, almost like something had been dragged across the road. He took a photo, got back in his car, and left. That night, Jason disappeared. His car was found near the same stretch of road. The keys were in the ignition. The engine was cold. There were no signs of a struggle, no footprints leading into the woods, nothing. Just an empty car and a road that went quiet again. The second story takes us far from Texas to a small village in Japan. In 2021, a young woman named Iko moved into an old family house that had been empty for years. It was cheap and she wanted a fresh start. The house was old but solid, wooden floors, sliding doors, narrow hallways. From the first night, she felt like she wasn't alone. She would hear footsteps when she was lying in bed, soft, slow steps in the hallway. When she checked, there was no one there. Doors she remembered closing would be open in the morning. Objects would be slightly out of place. She told herself it was just the house settling, just her imagination. Then she started hearing whispers. They were quiet, almost too quiet to notice at first. She thought it was the wind. But the house was closed, and the whispers seemed to come from inside the walls. Sometimes they sounded sad, sometimes angry. Sometimes they sounded like someone trying to say her name. Aiko tried recording the sounds on her phone. When she played it back, she could hear them, faint, but real. That's when she started getting scared. One night, as she lay in bed, she saw something move on the wall, a shadow, stretching unnaturally long, sliding across the surface like spilled ink. There was no one there to cast it. The light in the room hadn't changed. But the shadow kept moving, slowly creeping toward her bed. She jumped up and turned on every light in the house. The shadow was gone, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was still there, just out of sight. The next day, she decided she couldn't stay anymore. She packed her things and called a taxi. When it arrived, she stepped outside and the driver tried to start the car. It wouldn't start. He tried again. Nothing. He apologized and left. She tried calling another taxi. No answer. Her phone showed no signal, even though she had full service before. She started walking toward the main road. Somehow, after turning a few corners, she ended up right back in front of her house. She tried again. Same result. Every path led her back. That night, the whispers got louder, and this time they weren't just sounds. They were words. They were saying things about her life, things no one else should have known. She locked herself in her room and didn't sleep. Over the next few weeks, her friends noticed she was changing. She seemed distant, tired. Sometimes she would stop in the middle of a sentence and stare at the wall like she was listening to something no one else could hear. She told one friend that her shadow didn't always move when she did, that sometimes it lagged behind, sometimes it moved on its own. Aiko never completely disappeared. She still lives in the village, but people who know her say she's not the same. They say there's something wrong in her eyes, and some of them refuse to visit her house anymore. The third story begins in England in 2020. A man named Edward worked in a small historical archive. His job was simple. He organized old documents and scanned them into a database. One afternoon, he found a thin, unmarked diary mixed in with a box of unrelated papers. There was no name on it, no date on the cover, just pages filled with neat, careful handwriting. At first, the diary seemed to describe strange events, people hearing voices, people seeing things that weren't there, people slowly realizing that their reality wasn't as stable as they thought. Edward thought it was fiction, someone's creative writing project. He took it home out of curiosity. That night, he read more of it before bed, and that's when he noticed something strange. Some of the details in the diary matched his own life. The same street, the same kind of apartment, the same routine. He laughed it off, but he didn't sleep well. Over the next few days, strange things started happening. He would hear soft knocking sounds inside his walls. He would see movement in the corner of his eye and find nothing there. And sometimes he thought he heard someone whisper his name. One evening, he opened the diary again and felt his stomach drop. The latest entry wasn't about some unknown person anymore. It was about him. It described what he had done that day, where he had gone, what he had eaten, even what he was thinking while he read the page. He told himself it was a coincidence, a sick joke. But the next entry appeared the next day, and it described things before they happened. Edward started avoiding mirrors because he thought his reflection looked slightly wrong. Not different enough to point out exactly how, but wrong enough to make his skin crawl. He stopped sleeping, he stopped going out. And then, one day, he didn't show up for work. When police checked his apartment, they found no signs of a break-in, no signs of a struggle. The doors were locked from the inside. The diary was gone. On his desk, there was only a single note. It said, "I'm already gone." 3 stories, 3 different places, 3 people who saw something they couldn't explain, and in every case, the scariest part isn't what they saw. It's what it did to them. Because sometimes, the most terrifying thing isn't a monster in the dark. It's the moment you realize that reality itself might not be as solid as you thought. If these stories are still sitting heavy in your mind, that's because they're not built on sudden shocks. They're built on something much quieter, something that takes its time. Fear doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just moves in slowly, like a cold draft through a closed room, and by the time you notice it, it's already everywhere. After Jason vanished, his family refused to believe he was just gone. They pushed for more searches, more questions, more answers. Volunteers walked the woods again and again. They checked the creek. They checked old sheds and abandoned buildings. Nothing. No trace of him, no phone, no wallet, no sign that he had gone anywhere at all. It was like the road had simply kept him. One of the searchers later said something strange. He said that while they were out there, early in the morning, he thought he heard someone calling his name. He followed the sound for a few steps before realizing it made no sense. No one else was near him. When he told the group, they brushed it off. But he didn't go back the next day. He said the woods felt wrong, not dangerous, just wrong, like they were listening. Over time, the town stopped talking about Jason as much. That's what small towns do when there are no answers. Life moves on, but every once in a while, someone's car still stalls on Hollow Creek Road. And every once in a while, someone says they hear something in the trees. Most of them don't stop, they just drive faster. Aiko's life didn't end the way Jason's did, but in some ways, her story is harder to listen to. Because she's still here. She still wakes up every day. She still goes to the store. She still talks to people. But those people say she's different now. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a way you can point to and explain. Just quieter, more distant. She doesn't talk much about the house anymore. When she does, she talks about it like it's a person, like it has moods, like it gets angry when she tries to leave for too long. One of her friends said that once, during a visit, Aiko stopped in the middle of a sentence and looked toward the hallway. She listened for a few seconds, then said very calmly, "It's walking again." There was nothing there. That friend doesn't visit anymore. Some nights, neighbors say they see lights moving inside the house even when Aiko isn't home. Other nights, they say they hear quiet talking, like someone is having a conversation just under the sound of the wind. No one has ever reported seeing another person go in or out. And yet, the house never feels empty. Aiko once admitted something that still makes people uncomfortable. She said that sometimes, when she looks in the mirror, her reflection is a little slow. Not enough that she can prove it. Just enough that she notices. Just enough that it makes her heart start beating faster. She said she's learned not to look too long. And then there's Edward. The official story says he disappeared, that's all. No sign of foul play, no sign of where he went. But people who worked with him know it wasn't that simple. Because after he was gone, small things started feeling wrong in the archive. Files were out of place. Notes appeared on desks that no one remembered writing. And once someone swore they saw a figure standing at the end of one of the long aisles between shelves, only for it to be gone when they looked again. Most of them told themselves it was stress, or imagination, or the power of suggestion. That's what people do when something doesn't fit. But then came the notebook. It wasn't the same one Edward took home, at least not exactly. But it looked similar, same size, same kind of paper, same neat handwriting. It appeared on a shelf one morning with no explanation. When a worker opened it, the first few pages described ordinary things. The building, the desks, the quiet. And then, a few pages in, it started describing that worker's day. What time he arrived, what he had for lunch, what he was thinking as he stood there reading. He closed it and reported it. The notebook was removed. Management said it was a prank. No one ever explained who wrote it or how it got there. The worker who found it left his job not long after. Here is where these stories start to feel less like separate incidents and more like pieces of the same puzzle. In every case, there's something that watches, something that listens, something that waits to be noticed. And once it is, it doesn't rush. It doesn't need to. It just becomes part of the person's life. Jason noticed the road. Aiko noticed the house. Edward noticed the diary. And after that, none of their lives were normal again. There's a theory some researchers talk about, usually quietly, usually off the record. The idea is that some places and some objects don't just exist. They observe, they collect information, and sometimes they respond. Not in a way we can understand, and not in a way we can control. To most people, that sounds like a story, or a metaphor, or a superstition. But then you hear about the scratches on the road where Jason's car stopped, or the recordings Aiko made where whispers can be heard, even when no one was speaking, or the notebook that somehow knew what someone was going to do before they did it, and it becomes harder to laugh it off. What makes these stories truly disturbing isn't that something strange happened. Strange things happen all the time. It's that the people involved were fully awake, fully aware. They weren't dreaming, they weren't imagining a single moment and then waking up safe in their beds. They lived through it, step by step, realizing something was wrong and being unable to stop it. Imagine noticing that your world is changing in small ways. A sound that doesn't belong, a shadow that doesn't behave, words that appear where they shouldn't. And imagine realizing that the more you pay attention, the stronger it gets. That's the part that stays with you, because it suggests that sometimes the worst thing you can do is look too closely. Jason went back to that road during the day because he wanted proof that nothing was there. Aiko kept recording the whispers because she wanted to understand them. Edward kept reading the diary because he wanted to know how it worked. And in every case, curiosity didn't bring answers. It brought them deeper in. There's no official explanation for any of this. Some people say stress can make the mind do strange things. Some say isolation changes how we see the world. Some say coincidence is more powerful than we think, and sometimes those answers are enough. But sometimes they're not, because sometimes there are details that don't fit into any neat explanation. Physical marks, recordings, written words, witnesses who didn't know each other but described the same kinds of experiences. And when that happens, all you're left with is a question. What if there are things in our world that don't need us to believe in them to exist? What if they're already there, quietly watching, quietly waiting, and all they need is for someone to notice? That's not a comfortable thought. And maybe that's why most people choose to ignore stories like these. They tell themselves it's fiction, or exaggeration, or misunderstanding. It's easier that way. But the families of people like Jason don't get that comfort. They live with an empty space where someone used to be. The friends of people like Aiko live with the feeling that someone they care about is slowly becoming a stranger. And the co-workers of people like Edward live with the memory of a notebook that knew too much. So what do you do with stories like these? Maybe you just listen. Maybe you remember that not everything needs to be explored. Not every strange place needs to be visited. Not every mysterious object needs to be opened, because some stories don't end when the video does. Some of them keep going quietly in the background, whether we pay attention or not. And maybe that's the real warning here. Not that the world is full of monsters, but that the world might be full of things that don't care whether we were ready to understand them or not. If you've made it this far and you enjoy these kinds of true unsettling stories, don't forget to like this video, leave a comment telling me which story stayed with you the most, and subscribe to Mystery Spectrum US for more mysteries, disappearances, and unexplained cases. Because the scariest stories aren't always about what's hiding in the dark. Sometimes they're about what starts changing right in front of you while you're still wide awake.